sure what all you can see.
We can see the next page. Yes, it looks good, Sarah.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes, and this is a quote that I find is really helpful to return to in these times of a little bit of challenge, a little bit of stress, a little bit of turbulence. We have the ups, we have the downs, but the most important thing is, can we learn how to surf these waves? And what I've also learned is that nobody learns how to surf by themselves, but we learn this from other people and with other people. So, we have largely, learned from our teachers and our mentors, but we also learn from each other and eventually even our students. So let me just give a little background about myself that I think hopefully will tie some of these things together. And that is that I am a Pullman High graduate. So I started off here in Pullman. Some important things about my journey is that a really important part of my journey has been the discovery of my love for running, which was really I attribute to my brother saying one small phrase to me that has created a cascading wave, I would say, right, that has really propelled a lot of my life. I went on and did my bachelor's degree in sociology at Seattle University, where I also ran cross country and met my life partner. And followed my life partner across the country, where I worked for a couple years and was very unsatisfied with sort of the non-academic work environment, and had a happenstance meeting with Alan Smith, who is a new assistant professor at Purdue. And I learned, hey, there's this interesting guy. He studies sports psychology, and turned a light bulb on to me. And so next thing I knew, I knocked on his door and I was a graduate student at Purdue, where I got both my PhD and my master's degree there in kinesiology, emphasis in sport and exercise psychology. I developed a foundation for a very large and growing academic family. I wish I could have a picture of my academic family tree. That is a really core experience for me. And of course, met my very closest academic sibling, Ann Cox, that I get to also share a wall with next to us in between our offices. I was lucky enough and I made a circle here instead of using kind of a wave image, because I came full circle because I had the opportunity to come back to WSU in 2008. When I came back to WSU, kinesiology was really small and there was virtually no research engagement in our program. So I started searching anybody at WSU that had any interest, any connection to what I was interested in. I came across Tom Power in human development. And again, I went to his office, I knocked on his door, I introduced myself and started a very productive collaborative relationship with him, got involved in the development of the prevention science PhD program, and established a strong network of people across campus through this interdisciplinary program, and came full circle here. I've tried to highlight in each of these circles people or individuals that have been an important marker of these different stages in my career. And so I'm kind of interested if anybody, well, I know I'm going to run out of time here because I had so much trouble technically. But I want you to ponder a couple of these questions, and we'll maybe come back to this at the end. Is thinking about your own journey and your own experience, thinking about who are the critical people that made a difference in your journey? What were some critical turning points or experiences or opportunities that maybe were important in that journey? And what I find is that I return to this idea that over and over again, it is people who were very influential and that made really all the difference in my journey. So I like to really highlight and think about that as a common theme here as I navigate my waves. All right. So a little bit about my research. I'm going to give like a little some maybe snapshots of my research. Having a lot of trouble with technology here. A little bit of my research. This is the momentum that helped build my research waves. And in this kind of arena, I just am going to give very, very big kind of overviews. I certainly welcome questions now and or later with anybody who would like more information. But so the momentum that's building here is that we know physical activity can be very important to helping our physical, emotional, and social well-being. There are many documented benefits to being physically active, especially regular physical activity. And this has been something that has been really important to me physically. I have a deep connection with physical activity. You heard in my story, it started when I was young, my brother encouraging me to run and supporting me through that. And that really was something that I've carried through in my professional and personal experience. So I've experienced a lot of these benefits, and I've also experienced a lot of lows in these areas and seen those connections, which has really been a huge motivator for me. And what is, although it's good job security, but is also very unfortunate, is that these benefits, even though most people know these benefits, most people do not engage in regular physical activity, and enough so that they can achieve some of these, great benefits that we have by being physically active. So these are sort of the initial maybe tides that are pushing two kind of waves of research that I have been embarking on over the last 20 years. Sometimes I've tried to surf, sometimes I've crashed and burned to try to tackle this issue. So my two waves of questioning have to do about learning about what fosters positive physical activity experiences that can lead to long-term commitment to healthy behaviors. I started this in my master's research where I looked at social relationships. In particular, I looked at how parent and peer relationships could support and or undermine beliefs and motivation in youth sport. That has morphed into research that has gone beyond sport, but looked at more theoretical processes of motivation as they interact with exercise or physical activity more broadly. And that is, how can we learn to create experiences or foster experiences that are positive, pleasant, satisfying, all of the things that we know are key theoretical ingredients to long-term behavior. And most recently, this research has looked at how mindful movement can be a part of this puzzle or a part of this solution. In that, how can we foster mindful movement to capitalize on the benefits of both mindfulness as well as the benefits of movement, and how that can promote the most sustaining long-term motives for behavior, which is true intrinsic motivation. So the other wave of research that is related, and I think takes the theoretical models that I've done a lot of research in, and try to look at now, what can we do to promote physical, social, emotional well-being while using physical activity as a vehicle or a catalyst. So this also has roots in my early work at Purdue University, working with positive youth development programs such as the National Youth Sport Program. Those are things that use sport as an opportunity to teach life skills and to create strategies and skills for youth to be their best selves and to grow as positively as possible. So this is more about how can we design interventions and how can we promote positive movement experiences that can promote well-being for people. So really quickly, I'm going to give you a few snapshots here of the sort of the research context. So right now we're in a shifting paradigm in exercise psychology. We're into something that some people are now referring to as affectism, which is moving beyond the cognitive revolution, which is now saying we know, based on some theories such as dual mode theory, that we have two processes. We have implicit and explicit processes. Implicit processes, let me start with explicit. Explicit processes are the cognitive rational thinking that we can engage in when we have ample time and resources. These are the motivation theories that we mostly know about and that we have been studying for the last 30, 40, 50 years now, almost. This is a lot about goal setting, and this is a lot about knowing what the right thing to do is. But what we know is that when we get stressed, when we get tired, when we have limited resources, whether that be cognitive resources, affective resources, physical resources, our implicit processes take over. And those implicit processes are our affect, our emotion, our unconscious, processes and associations that are created. And since this happens an awful lot, what we know is that we need to pay at least as much attention to the affective experience and those implicit processes as we do to the explicit processes. And so that has propelled us to look at how can we capitalize on understanding that we're rational beings, we have goals, we have thoughts, but we also are implicit beings and affective beings, and that our experiences really matter. So it brings us to this idea of exercise. What does exercise feel like? Exercise feels often very uncomfortable physically, sometimes socially, sometimes mentally. And, we're taught, that exercise maybe feels bad or it's hard. And that's fighting against a lot of our implicit, processes. So what happens when we exercise really hard? Our interoceptive cues of our body are kind of screaming at us and we're feeling things. And those feelings are going to be very important in terms of our future actions and our future choices and behaviors. So what we know is that positive affective experiences during exercise are associated with continued exercise behavior. They can be associated with more intense exercise, so that you're able to sustain higher intensities of exercise longer. And so we're learning that it's really important to pay attention to what the experience of the individual is. Mindfulness is something that I have become interested in over the last a little bit more than 10 years now, as a way to try to understand the physical activity experience. And so we also know that mindfulness has many benefits to it, many cognitive benefits, maybe many emotional benefits. And so mindfulness itself is an opportunity into positive well-being. And what we know is that movement is an avenue into positive well-being. So if we look at mindful movement, we have an opportunity to capitalize on multiple processes that can lead to well-being. Mindfulness is also an excellent opportunity to really explore the experience of movement and exercise. So we have embarked on doing some research that might be theoretical, and that we have gone into a lab and we tried to manipulate the exercise experience with this idea that maybe paying attention to our exercise experience might be helpful. It might be supportive of both cognitive processes as well as affective motivational processes. We found that when we manipulate the exercise experience with either kind of a mindful associative attention strategy compared to a distracting strategy, they have very similar affective experiences. So that means how it's experienced can be not unpleasant if we're mindful. We know that it's fun to listen to music. We know that it could be entertaining. And so that's positive. But when you're distracted, you're not in your body, you're not in tune, and you're not developing other core connections to internalize that behavior. although it's very important. So not only do we do this quantitative experimental research, but we often like to interview our participants and talk to them and actually engage with learning more in depth about their experience. And although quantitatively, we don't really see a difference here, what we do find is that about 30% of our sample, and in this case, this is a sample of inactive participants in a study that engaged in moderately high intensity, tense exercise, that those individuals really, really disliked when we asked them to be mindful, and we tried to create a mindful movement experience for them. 70% thought it was very interesting, enjoyed it. It was a new way to connect with their experience. 30% did not. So this is telling us that we have a lot more work to do to understand how should we introduce the concept of mindful movement? Who can it be useful for? And so that's going to be, one strand of our research. Really quickly, a few other ways that we've looked at this. We've done a lot of research that has been longitudinal, so following participants over time, looking at their experience, tracking how their motivation and their mindfulness go together, how they change. We have introduced several intervention type studies that have tried to incorporate mindful movement into either high school, or currently we're working on a middle school intervention. So we're trying really hard to take the theoretical understanding of motivation and affect and translate that into some behavior interventions. So real quick, here are some key conclusions that we have identified in this research is that motivation is often more affective than cognitive. So our experience is absolutely critical to understand. Motivation that is internalized will lead to sustained behavior over the long term, and that we really believe mindful movement could help us with that internalization process and could really be a strategy to help with long-term behavior change. The other wave of research here is that through the work on interventions, through the work on working out in the field, we found, not surprisingly, that the social context has to be intentionally fostered, and that by using things like implementation science to design interventions, particularly interventions that include stakeholder input, are very vital to not only the external validity, but also the sustainability of interventions. And can they actually work? And what we have found in many studies and in different kind of ways is that these relationships need to be nurtured and fostered, and that it's not up to chance whether these will be successful, that we have to do that very intentionally. So I'm going to return to another form of a graphic here of kind of my research journey or timeline. And what you can see here is I had a vision in my head, and this is not my vision. I'm afraid my graphic art skills are lacking here. But what this shows is my path and my journey here. My path is showing you my arrows along my path are showing you what we could use as this analogy of a wave would be like my currents of my research. It could also be considered like a thread. So how are these things interconnected with one another? How does something that I started off with? So in my graduate program, I was really interested in social relationships. I had the opportunity to work with positive youth development. I identified some key partners along the way, and we see some common threads here. So social relationships are connected, all across multiple pathways here. Positive youth development, again, has many pathways in which it's carried forward. Coming to WSU, getting involved in prevention science and getting introduced to implementation science has also been a highly influential, current that has propelled intervention work forward. Having my very dear partner in research crime, Ann Cox, coming to WSU and being my lab co-director has absolutely been an amazing opportunity to create a synergy of our common interests, passions, and common training as well, so that that work that we both kind of separately were coming to understand the power of things like self-compassion and mindfulness, and these kind of different approaches to looking at behavior and motivation has really helped shift some experiments that we've done, as well as some interventions that we've done. So hopefully now I'm finally getting to a little bit more of an interactive component here to ask you all to reflect on a couple of key questions. And I don't know why I can't advance my slides. Okay, so here I'd like to kind of take an opportunity to think about what are the currents, and by currents, remember, like the waves, and the current is the push and the pull that are weaving their way through your own trajectory. And it's important to think these might reflect some of your core values, your core motivations. They also might represent ultimately your impact or your contribution, that you'll be making. And what are the opportunities maybe that you took a chance on? So I literally knocked on people's doors, and that opened up other doors for me. Now it's virtual doors, I suppose. But those things require taking a little bit of daring, taking a little bit of a chance. But then that also presents growth and opportunity. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to share what they might notice as either a common thread or a key opportunity that might have been pivotal at shaping their research trajectory.
If anyone wants to share, just speak up. I'm also looking for hands.
Do you mind if I ask a different question?
No?
Sure, that's great.
When you were talking about your research, I think it was your first research slide, and you were talking about some people didn't feel comfortable when you tried to create a mindful experience for them.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you went about creating that mindful experience?
Yeah, so in that particular study, we had individuals come into the research lab, and we had them walking on a treadmill, and we tried to induce a moderately high intensity for the reason that we know that there is a limit at which exercise at higher intensities will switch to extremely unpleasant, extremely difficult and challenging. And so we wanted to push those boundaries and see if we could get people to be mindful in those moments. So we had a guided audio that was a mindfulness track that guided the participants as they were walking to pay attention to their experience, to notice with curiosity and without judgment what they were experiencing and what they were feeling. And so that guided mindfulness experience was something that all the participants experienced. And then they were also, within subjects design, they also participated in an exercise experience where they picked a podcast and they listened to a podcast and they were distracted through their exercise experience. And so when we interviewed them afterwards, we found out that the majority of them thought that the guided mindful experience was interesting. They thought that it was something that maybe they hadn't experienced before, and it felt positive and maybe rewarding for many of them. And then 30% of them just said, I do not want to feel these feelings in my body. So this is where we decided we need to really think carefully about maybe who's ready, who maybe has deeper negative associations with moving their body and those, physical exertion experiences, and that jumping right into guiding them to pay attention to their experience maybe was not going to be the right strategy for them. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah. Robert Danielson, I think. He directed me to this article that I read over the weekend. It's from an NIH study, I believe, and the title of it is "Has the Science of Mindfulness Lost Its Mind?" And it's by Miguel Farias and Catherine Wilcombe. Anyways, it talks about those individual differences that you just mentioned and how it's not so cut and dried. Mindfulness isn't necessarily always positive or always for everyone. Some people get great benefit out of it. Some people really excel and flourish with it, and it's the opposite for other people.
Absolutely. And I think that I was really glad that we did these follow-up interviews so that we could really highlight this concept, right? That everybody's experience is unique and that there are different things that will either help or maybe hinder, people. So I do think that that's such an important message. All right. If we don't have, I'm welcome any other questions. They can be specific, they can be general.
I'm just trying to think back to your question here, Sarah, and the currents. I think, you mentioned working with Anne, but every time a new colleague is hired, or there's a potential collaboration, and everyone is kind of a current in your own trajectory, I think. So,
Absolutely. I would say that like every relationship you develop, every connection, collaboration is a window or an opportunity to learn something. I feel like I've learned a lot when I work with people that also are in a different field, have a different training, because they will see things differently or think differently that force you to see or think or feel differently. And that can create so much more. Than just having a common thread. And I see your hand up.
Well, I have plenty to say on this topic. I was going to say something that it was just reminded of this, like last week, literally, was how important it is to put yourself in new situations, because I'm such a reactor. Like we don't think of these new ideas in silos. Like you have to have something to react to. And like for me, it was walking into a yoga studio for the first time, changed my entire research program. And then that's why conferences and conversations and meeting different kinds of people. I think sometimes I can get really stuck in my own work and I feel an emotional depletion when I'm not getting enough of that, or like a stagnation maybe with the work that I'm doing. So that's just a plug for like, it's just new people, new environments, new stimuli. I think has been a big theme for me.
Thank you. So important.
I wanted to ask about grants, because I'm seeing that your work has so much application to a lot of different grants and funding agencies, and I like the idea that it's so interdisciplinary. And I think you recently went for an NIH, and that's really exciting. This just seems like so applicable to most people's lives, because most people, understand the quality of how mind body relates to exercise, but they don't understand the complexities. And you really shared some interesting information with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that is a perfect segue. I was just going to talk a little bit about grant experiences. And a recurring theme is that the team you're working with is absolutely critical, absolutely vital. Also, I think I had that opportunity to be involved in like the beginning stages of the interdisciplinary PhD program in prevention science, which is about bringing full circle basic science with intervention, translational research, and really getting to work so interdisciplinary. And I think that that's been a really important influence on me and thinking about how do we tackle big problems. We don't tackle them alone, and we don't tackle them with one line of thinking. We tackle them as a team, as a community. And so I was, trying to think about this in terms of not just my research experiences, but here's some grant experiences. And these are a couple things that I thought of, was that I've been involved in quite a few unsuccessful grant proposals. And that I found a few keys, like when something is a new area of research, like when we first started studying mindful movement, over 10 years ago, we didn't have a lot under our belt. And so, yes, we got dinged for not having a lot of experience in that area. That makes sense, right? Unsuccessful grants are often also a misfit between the funding agency or the call and what you really want to do. So you often try to like fit your idea into the call, and there's a misalignment. And I think that comes through pretty easily. You could also have a misalignment with the reviewers. And so the reviewers are reading something and you are not able to communicate your ideas and your thought in a way that allowed the reviewers to maybe see the potential that was behind your ideas. Most importantly, I think that we have gotten dinged quite a bit by saying that we haven't had the right context. And number one, we didn't used to have a graduate program at all, and that really did hurt us. Or we didn't have enough like resources. We maybe didn't have the right level of expertise on a grant. As well as being concerned with not having enough sort of stakeholder input, or being too theoretical and not trying to bridge that gap. So what I've also seen is that if you were to flip the script a little bit here, successful grants will have a really strong rationale and foundation that is very aligned with the funding opportunity. So finding the right fit is really critical. Having really good preliminary data, having a track record, and that track record is expertise, but also the track record of the team. So the team has to have the necessary skills, the expertise, but also a record of working together. So you can't just pull the best and the brightest and then never have shown that they can work well together. So finding, how you could create a team that has proven that they have a productive working relationship seems to be another kind of critical component here. I'm sure I've missed a lot of different things, so please pipe up or share some other keys to either being successful or not successful.
Hello, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, all right. Thank you so very, very much. This is really interesting. I was actually going to ask this question. I know how much effort you put into starting a graduate program for kinesiology. Thank you for those efforts. And I was wondering, knowing that I actually encouraged some of our students in EdSci to attend this, and I could see some of them here. How well do you think a functional graduate program can also contribute to success for a faculty as well as the graduate students, both on grants and research more generally?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very good question. And I think it is a vital part of sort of the academic enterprise. And I'm not going to limit it to graduate students, because for my first, 12 years here at WSU, we had no graduate program, and we were able to do a lot of this research with undergraduate research assistants. I think what the graduate students allow you to do is to take that foundation and really build on it. Something absolutely vital about having graduate students is that opportunity for more in-depth dialogue and discovery through conversation, through seminars, through diving in a little bit deeper into the research. Their questions, their insights, their experiences can help, really build your research to be deeper, to be stronger, to consider new things. So it's a synergy. You're mentoring and you're teaching them through the process, but you're learning from the students, and then the students are able to contribute to the work. And so it creates a stronger synergy than, that we don't see as often, when we're not working with students, because students are inquisitive, they're curious, they ask questions, and those questions help us to grow and help us to do better.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely. Let me share a couple. You mentioned this grant that we just submitted. This is a lot on the slide. I'm sorry, I kind of word vomited here. This is an NIH grant that Anne and I just submitted a couple weeks ago now, almost a couple weeks ago. It was really grounded in Anne's inspirations that were born out of COVID. What we have found over the last 5 years now, developing this intervention, is that it took us 5 years to get to a place where we felt really good about submitting a viable NIH grant. Our past NIH grants really were not that successful. And what we found is that we've developed a much stronger base of our research on mind-body, mindfulness in particular. We have a strong history of research with youth, working in schools, working in after school, like positive youth development programs. We have a really strong implementation science framework. We met with the PO, and the PO basically said, this all sounds great. You have to have somebody on your team who has clinical trial experience that has been funded by NIH. None of this was in any of the pages and pages of documentation for the grant. But she said, yeah, who's on your team who has that experience? So that was really helpful. So number one, meet with the PO, talk to them about your program, not just is this a fit, which was our main goal, but also like what else can you learn from them that will help you navigate that process. So I think it was Anne that reached out, Shola, to you and several other people in the college asking, we need a partner with NIH clinical trial experience. And by the way, we'd also really like that person to be highly engaged in our research topic and someone who really wants to be part of a collaborative team. So I think we ended up meeting with Sterling McPherson, and he connected us with Eka Borduli, who is in the College of Medicine now. And she was a perfect fit. She has a sport background. She has young children. She does implementation science, intervention research. She has all of these key kind of pieces, and she was super motivated in our intervention. She's been absolutely helpful in navigating the process. So this is another reason to get somebody with deep experience in the exact grant mechanism that you're looking for. And so she was able to give us a sample grant in the exact same mechanism, the R34 mechanism. She was able to give vital feedback, not only on sort of the ideas, the conceptualization, but also the execution of writing the grant. And so that was a really important kind of piece there to help make, I think, that grant development experience, at least the development experience, successful. We'll have to see on the final outcome there. I know we're running short on time. I just want to end by saying people are our most valuable resources. Personal connection, communication, these are things that will help make things work. It's so important that we reach out to experts, we seek connection, we develop relationships, you knock on doors, you don't be afraid to ask somebody for their help or their support, but you want to cultivate those relationships, and you want to also demonstrate that you can work with somebody successfully, that is something that will be a good, productive working relationship, and that all of those things will make the experience go a lot more smoothly and also be a lot more rewarding as well. All right, I need to put up my final slide here, which is a thank you to all the people I've collaborated with. I think this is a fairly good list. I know I'm missing a few people, but there are so many people that you work with in your career. one thing that we do in our latest intervention work is we end our intervention with middle school girls, and we ask them to notice the good. So notice the good. What went well? You know, in a time where there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, we need to be grateful for what we can. Notice the good and then share the good. So here, reach out to people, thank them, tell them that you see them, that you notice them, that they've made a difference. And yeah, because people are our most valuable resource. So I can't say thank you enough to Anne and this whole list of people. So I left 0 time for questions here, but I am more than happy to stay on and answer questions and or continue the conversation at any later date.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Sarah. That was such a beautiful, beautiful presentation. We have very, very thankful to you and all the great work that you do in the college. Thank you so very much. Please join me in saying thank you to Sarah, please. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for being here today. Our next research conversation will be on Wednesday, April 2nd, not April Fool, but April 2nd at 12 noon. And I've asked Karen Thomas Brown, the dean, to come and share with the college a research vision, our own program of research too, because I think many of us were not there when she came and gave a job talk. I thought it would be nice for her to present a research vision, a program of research to the college. That will happen next research conversation. But for today, thank you so very much, Sarah. We have certainly enjoyed learning about your journey, and thanks to everyone here this afternoon. Have a terrific rest of your week, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thanks.